Welcome to this new episode of the Water Talks podcast, where water treatment practice, policy, and innovation are given the attention that they deserve. I'm your host, Els Vanbeckevoort, and today I am so excited to introduce to you my co-host and our guest, Scott Bowron. Hey, good evening, Scott. How are you doing?
Hello,
And
Alice.
welcome to
How
the
are
hot
you?
seat. I'm good. I'm
Yeah, it's
good.
good to meet again, and it's amazing how quickly a month passes.
I
It's
know.
been such a busy time, and so here we are again, connecting and sharing information. It's always good.
Indeed, it is. And for our listeners who don't know Scott, which won't be very many, I'm sure, but Scott has a long and successful career in water management, has served the aquatics industry well for many years, providing CPO training for pool operators and many more things beyond that as well. Maybe Scott, just for those people that don't know you, that are first, just tuning into the show or just have gotten to know us as the hosts of this wonderful podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your hobbies, just a bit of a personal
Sure.
intro.
Sure. I guess I'll start with my work background. It just real quick. I was hired my career job was with the City of London. I was hired in 1981, right around now. Uh, as a casual employee or summer temp. And in those days, you either got hired or fired pretty much the same time. So I luckily got hired by them. And so I had a very good career. I started in the wastewater business and did some water and all that spiel. I had a class 4 wastewater license and a class 2 water distribution license at one time. In the 90s, I always say I saw the light and I moved over to recreation. Very fortunate to have that opportunity in those days because I changed jobs almost completely from what I used to do. However, I stayed with the same employers, so I had the benefit of long employment. And so I moved to recreation and had arenas and pools and community centers, that whole spiel. Over the years, ended up focusing on aquatics. Became involved in the projects and the project management piece of it. I went back to school for it. Our director was extremely supportive in moving this forward to help our workplace grow and then I was part of that, and I was very fortunate, trying to be a little bit greener, trying to be more educated, so we got good equipment, consistency among equipment, all those kind of things were discussed over the years. So very lucky, and retired 8 years ago,
Hmm.
and worked for a company for a short while, and then I started actually 6 years ago this month, actually next week I believe it is. I started Clear Aquatics, so it's my career now, and I do a lot of training. I do filtration systems, chemistry systems, try to help people run their facilities more correctly, and which is why I know Els, because I think when we met, we had a common
Cool. Yeah.
bond and goal, and when you're saying the same words together in a room, you start chatting more. So that's kind of how we met, and that's sort of my work career. So I've been very lucky. Clear Aquatics has been well received, and I've done quite well. And but I have retired once. I don't know what
Funny,
that.
yeah?
We don't really know what
Retirement.
retired means. No, no. I just
No,
switched.
no, no. That's it. That's it.
My private
For
life is. I have two daughters in their 20s.
nice.
One lives in northern Alberta. The other one lives in Sweden. They're both well-educated, great kids. I've been very lucky with them, and they're on their own now. So those
Right.
were
Right.
things. And then the other things I do, I think well, yeah, I know you well because we talk. I've been a martial artist for 48 years, pretty high ranking in Canada, high black belt, and I run a small karate club out of London. And the other things I do with my work, I was on the Model Aquatic Health Code Technical Committee. I was on the working group for the new regulations here in Ontario. Spoken at the World Aquatic Conference several times all over North America. I've done talks on what we do.
Right. Right. No, that's exciting. But before we get into the weeds on the technical side, like I've always been fascinated by the idea that you're a Toastmaster and you're this black belt in karate. Like, how do those two kind of combine? Like, that's a funny combination, right?
Yeah, so I Toastmasters wasn't a planned event. When I went and took my CPO instructor training, they advised it. Actually, that's how I started. And so when I was down doing that course, they had a spiel on it as part of the thing to grow and to be a better instructor. So I came back to London and looked it up. And by chance, I worked for the City of London, and they had a Toastmasters club in London at City Hall. So I connected with that group, and I ended up, I guess I'm kind of competitive. I ended up competing in Toastmasters, if you can believe it, with speeches and evaluation, all kinds of pieces. And I was president of the company or for a while, or the group, and all those kind of things. And what do you teach in Toastmasters? I really advocated to people is, first of all, speaking correctly, speaking comfortably in front of groups, and that's obviously
Right.
the big focus, which people miss, right? And are not really sure of what to do with that. And it gives you great. I've seen people who cry getting up in front of people
Yes.
who are now paid speakers. Like, the difference is incredible. With martial arts, to compare it, kind of the same thing. People grow personally in it, and I've been very fortunate. I've taught martial arts for about 40 years, and watching people's growth, either through high performance athletes who just get better, or people who really. I have a little guy right now. A year and a half ago, he was, I don't know, in my day, he was probably the picked on kid.
Yes.
He just made the track team. And I said, if you do martial arts, you'll get better at soccer. And he's young. And I said, better at
Everything.
soccer, better at everything. And he comes out to me and goes, I just made the track team, and he was never that kid. So those are stories of growth in in a quick and dirty way. But I think they both have values in how you learn and how you grow as a person. And hopefully it benefits you. And it's not for everybody, but it was both for me. And I
Yeah.
enjoyed thoroughly both.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I didn't do karate or kind of martial arts, but I think doing sports is really helpful from a discipline perspective and just focus and trying to kind of really persevere, right, in doing something like that's, I think, is there's lots of good character that can come out of that, and those are life skills that you don't necessarily pick up in other places. So that's
Right.
obviously a great combination for sure.
It's got a long tail. It changes people's lives, and if
Yeah,
you're
for the better.
can
Yeah.
hang on to something, and it's not always easy, but it has value. And the easy road isn't always the best road for
Very true. Very true. I agree.
yeah.
So we've enjoyed working together now for many years, and like it's quite an interesting and an exciting journey that we're on. But maybe, stepping back a little bit, like what do you love about your job the most? Like what is it that really still, that kind of pulled you out of retirement? I mean, come on.
I couldn't imagine retiring, quite honestly. I still don't see that in my forecast, but it's a word people like to use. And then I go, well, what are you going to do? Nothing. Well, you can't do nothing. So
Of
that's a whole
course.
chat. What do I like about what I do? First of all, now I only have to take care of me. So that's one good thing. I really like, and I guess I'll call it giving back, Els. I really think that I've been fortunate and had a good base to learn. And I obviously really liked it. I had a passion for it, so I wanted to learn more, and I enjoy sharing it. And if
Right.
you read, I get Google reviews from when I do training, and people say Scott's passion shows, that kind of thing, and I
Right.
really enjoy that. I think that's a very nice compliment to me that I have taught CPO for more than I think 17 years now, something like.
Wow. Yes.
And I can still go in the classroom and create passion, we'll call it, or enough energy. I'm a pretty high energy person, and I try to transmit that without being overwhelming, and that's a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yes.
I like to think that I'm giving back and showing people, and whether people are brand new
Right.
or whether people are really seasoned, and I've had
Both.
PhDs and all kinds of well-educated people, but not educated maybe in what I know.
It's very practical, right? It's a very specialized skill set, really, and that's kind of where there's a gap that you're filling. I think that's
Yeah,
important as well, for
and be able
sure.
to talk to both spectrums, right? So the person
Exactly.
who's new and
Exactly.
doesn't know very much, but to the very highly skilled person, the one
Right. Right.
that
Exactly.
Dr.
So
Beaches.
maybe then, if you could choose to change one thing about what you do or your work, or kind of, or something completely outside of maybe the work, maybe you love all of it, but if there was one thing that you could kind of like click your fingers and it would be different, like what would that be?
About my business or what I do.
About what you do, or about your work or your business, or
Uh,
what you do?
I guess from an industry's perspective, uh,
Yes.
I really, we don't like to be mandated. However, I think we need a bigger push. If you look at water systems, drinking water systems,
Right.
wastewater systems, people are trained and people get money and people do these things because they're forced to.
Right.
With the aquatics industry, and that's a learning piece for you, you're going, I can't believe people don't want to do this.
Right.
It's we have a public health code, but that's a basic mandate. It doesn't take you deep diving into really how to perform better. It's just get you through, so the basic minimums, training, and then taking training and elevating it and then pushing forward. I
Right.
really wish we had a stronger voice in propelling our industry. Down in the US now, it's starting to become almost like a trade. So that's probably first steps. And now it's here. There's pool schools where you actually go and do learning over a longer period of time, more classroom style.
Yeah, which makes sense, I guess, if you think about it, because it is very practical. And we both started our water careers in drinking water systems and municipal drinking water systems, or wastewater. And there is such a vast foundation of training and accreditation and competency that really is
Right.
part of best practice there,
Well,
for
and
sure.
and to me, I go, that also holds people to the careers. If you're training that person to a certain level and
Right.
it is value, then there's a monetary value as well. It's not you got to get this and just to hold a job.
Yeah.
There's a value, right? So I think it's got a overarching, a bigger value
Right.
to our. It's just the expertise that we would like to carry with people, rather than I'm just getting by, man,
Yeah.
and
Doing the bare minimum.
that's
Right.
the bare
Right.
minimum. I'm at a hotel now, and I don't know what their policy is on here, but hotels are notorious for, right, and they have a high turnover rate. All those things that are challenges, and yet people are jumping in the pool. So is it getting the right attention? And I
Yeah.
like to see that grow.
Agreed.
Exponentially.
I think that's a very good position to have, and I think we're both aligned in that way as well. Like, it's been an interesting journey for us over the last 12 months in our podcast, and I've had some people ask me, hey, can you do one more than once a month? And and there's so much opportunity and so much that we could be focusing on. But to do it justice, it's not necessarily the most straightforward thing to do. So maybe, just for the benefit of our listeners, I'd be really interested to hear about your highlights, maybe of some of the guests that we've had, some of the general ideas, philosophies, takeaways, I guess, that what has stood out for you, I suppose, over these last 12 months, because we've been doing this for more than 12 months now, if you can believe
Wow,
it. This is episode
I
11.
actually can't. That's amazing. Uh, Time does pass. Well, I like to think that I learned something from everyone, and I've had some key points. I was very excited to have Dr. Beach on. I guess I just admire him, and I've known him for a very long time, and I was really happy
Yeah.
that he said yes. So, there's a scholar. I don't know if the scholar is the right word for him. He's pretty easy to chat to, but he's very well respected in our industry, and from a different perspective, representing the CDC and his timeline, etc. So I
Right.
like that, and I really liked the podcast with both Darren and Brett, because those are folks with boots on the ground type of. They're living it and making change and
Right.
advocating, and you got it. If you don't get excited by those folks that with our passion, then we're all talking the same language then, and you're helping them grow. I guess I look at that and go, wow, that's really
Exciting.
cool stuff.
Yeah.
um, I think I picked something up from everyone. If I knew this question was coming, I would have probably asked this one. 'Cause I have a Rolodex of things that stood out with me, but I kind of have to think back further to go, okay, right.
Where did we
Jim,
start? Yes. Yeah. I know. And it's, it's,
Jim Shubat, like the thinking is the same, but it's more
Yeah.
technical and
Yeah.
how it looks at things and the holistic approach. And you learn from everyone.
I agree. I agree. I've had some good comments, I guess, as well. Our deck cleaning session, people
Oh
thought
yeah,
that was
yeah, there
very
you go.
interesting.
Ludo, right?
Yeah, yeah. They thought that was really kind of new and yeah, a complete mystery beforehand. So that kind of was well
Who knew?
received, I guess. I think our session on pumps was great as well,
Oh gosh,
to
yeah.
help
Yeah.
right, to help people understand that.
So there
So
you go.
we're
I just need to refresh my brain. My
I know, and I've had a chance to think about it because I'm asking you the question. So that's
I
easy. I'm cheating. I'm
uh,
cheating here. But
well, but Ludo, like there's how much information and history that gentleman has to bring to us. And honestly, I was like, who knew about microbiology on the floor and having such an impact on your pool process? So now when I'm training, I'm able to give people a better perspective, and I talk about it, and they're like, we just don't have that here yet. Uh,
no,
in North America, and I'm still trying to figure out how much chlorine to put in the pool. Never mind, is the floor clean? And so
yeah,
that's the building blocks of where can we go to versus where
yeah.
we are. Yeah, and
Exactly. And I
I love.
think that's kind of the story that we're trying to tell, right? We're trying to make it really practical and useful for our listeners so that they can say, okay, I've learned something from this. This is going to help me to do my job better, or, at least I know where to go to get more information. And hopefully, generally speaking, we're spreading the message, if you like. Maybe then getting into some more practical aspects, because I think this is a great episode for us to kind of lay that foundation once more, because the next number of months we're going to maybe get into a little bit more into the weeds on some very specific maybe science-based problems that that require a little bit more theory, if you like, as well, as we explore other topics. But what are the takeaways from your perspective that, let's say this is a summary session, we're kind of, just doing a little bit of a recap for our audience. What are the takeaways? What can we share with people today to say, okay, how do we begin to, go from a suboptimal pool to an optimal pool? What are some of the key things that people should be looking at?
Well, I guess I would look at it. I when we did the talk at Pro, I really liked that one slide. Like that's all I remember is that slide, because it was like, this is it. Here it is the relationship between the water, the air, the HVAC, the building envelope, the people. Everything has a
Is
part.
connected,
It is
right?
connected, and it's like the earth, right? Everything is connected. And I really like that. And I was at a meeting after a work meeting after work today, and just talking to the folks. So I just kind of had them for about 45 minutes, and they have some particular problems, and we're just kind of picking apart. I just kind of went, so this is related to this. This is related to this. You're having this problem over here. It's like a big puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start with basics and know that you're starting with water chemistry and the pH, which we constantly push, and it's still not understood. pH is that such an important piece of that integral element at the beginning, and then how much chlorine are you actually using versus what do you need to use, and then the other associated pieces, and then what does that do to your air, and then what does it do to the people, and how much does it cost you to blow that air out the door and
Right.
down the drain, and then what are we on a bigger scale? Sorry, Alice, I'm just gonna
No,
on
no.
a bigger scale, on a macro, we're supposed to be getting sustainable, and we're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
green, and all those words we hear. And our business is a huge dollar value in
Yeah.
energy, and yet we don't.
And waste. Yeah.
And waste. Well, that's really what we're doing, is most of it we're throwing out the door. So, bringing that, and hopefully the knowledge that you bring forward and that I bring forward helps people understand more correctly, and hopes, in 10 years, maybe it'll make a change. Who knows?
I agree. And maybe, for our listeners, pH, let's just throw a couple of truth bombs out there. pH is the most important parameter, right? We've been drilled in that way to think that way, but, there's a good reason for that. And so having a much more narrow pH window, although, with a a good control strategy to be able to do that. But the impact is quite significant, right? Like we've talked to many people who don't understand that if you manage your pH and you don't go too low, you're not going to create those nasty trichloramines that are going to pollute the air and going to make it a very unpleasant environment. So like not going below 7.2 or something like that, and not going too high, because then your chlorine is just not going to do its disinfectant capacity. It's not going to fulfill its required disinfection efficacy, and so you have to add a lot more. And of course, as you're adding more chlorine, you're also bumping up your pH typically, right? Because you're using liquid chlorine, which is going to increase the pH. So then you're back to dosing acid. And as our good friend Ludo says, you're carrying water to the sea, because you're in this vicious circle where you're never getting any control and you're wasteful all of the time. And so there's lots of good reasons why, if you can just get that pH even, and Darren talked about it, I guess, in one of the episodes, right? Darren and Brent did as well, I think, at Pro. But if you can just start with something really small like that, and we can help our customers to get their arms around it,
And then,
it has big impact.
yeah, and then you spoke to it just now, and just to deep. I always try to use simple ideas. If you have
You
a
do.
mechanic, you can't give them a crescent wrench and say fix the car. You have to have good tools. The toolkit has to be correct. And
Yes.
when you're just getting by, or I know people who plug in their controller when the health inspector shows up, so they pass, and those kind of things. That's the really tough one, or they don't have a controller. But once you have a controller, is to have a good quality item that will do the job and read to the parameters that we're addressing here. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
all learned, because it's a big market, and people are selling their equipment and all those things. So you have to do your
And it
homework.
because,
I always tell
right,
people, do your homework. If you're building a new project, do your
right.
homework. Don't let somebody else tell you what's going on. Do your homework.
Yeah, and that's such good advice, Scott, because ultimately, you have to be able to make informed decisions, right? And so part of the work that we do together jointly is to try and empower people to be able to even understand what is a good measurement. What is an accurate and a precise reading, what's required for good measurements. And, it needs to be an objective standard, not some subjective, okay, I think it's this or whatever it is. It needs to follow a calibratable laboratory standard as well. So there's a way that you have an external means to your little instrument that can tell you that when it's reading pH 7.32 or whatever it is, that it's actually 7.32 and it's not something completely different.
Right.
Because we've seen some crazy things.
If I'm driving down the road doing 120 kilometers an hour, I don't want my car doing 142. I want it doing 120. It has to read correctly. I have to believe in it, and it has to be right, or I'm going to be in trouble. It's
Your
just,
odometer, yes, it
yeah,
has to be. It has to be calibrated. Absolutely, yeah.
it has
There
to
you
be
go. It's a
correct.
great
And
analogy.
when you're using your testing equipment, whether it's handheld or on the wall,
Right.
it has to be well calibrated, and it has to work. And then you
Yeah,
can't make
absolutely,
it try
for
to
sure.
fit it into the square hole. So the thing.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, it's
That's a good place to start. And I think, as we've been working together, helping, stakeholders, our clients to move towards a more digital water quality management system, people are really interested, but at the same time, they're really nervous about it. They're concerned because they think that, okay, public health is not going to allow this. This is not going to fly. We won't be able to do this. And obviously, what would you say to our listeners who are maybe contemplating, going digital, going in a more automated direction? Like, how would you respond to someone like that?
well. Sorry, I use different analogies. I said mine looks broken, but you have this. We use this a lot. It's a digital format. 25 years ago, I used a phone and called people, but we learned to use a phone, and that's digital, and now we depend on it. People are 100 times a day. And digital is a huge tool for risk, which we are becoming much more of a risk society. It also can give you better information. You can be on your phone. You can have, if you need to, check it in 24/7. There's so many values to it, and I always start with risk, because We live in a very litigious society. We have to be careful
Right.
of. And then to get the history of your pool, and are you running correctly, or are you running incorrectly, or are certain people struggling with it? When I go on holidays, does the pool fall off? All those things. Are people dumping chemicals in the pool at night? All those things you can capture, and it's legal by public health. And digital is absolutely, when we got the new regs in 2018, it allowed. Before 2018, it actually didn't have a caveat for digital technology, but now it does. So yes, it's allowed, and it's the world we live in. So now why not embrace it? Hook it up to your BAS system, have it integrated that way,
Right.
save money with it.
Yeah, there's lots of the system of benefits becomes available. Like it, you don't know what you don't know, right? That's one of our
You
favorite
don't know what you.
phrases on the show. You don't know what you don't know, and when you know it, you can't unknow it. Anyway, like it's kind of one of those situations that maybe for the first time you get a true understanding of, like you say, where the risk is, and then where the opportunity lies from going from suboptimal to an optimal process, which invariably, as we were at Pro and we talked about in our presentation, leads to significant cost savings in the first place. And secondly, also reduces all of that waste, and generally you get to a much more sustainable outcome. And that's kind of interesting because I was speaking with somebody who's still involved these days with the Model Aquatic Health Code as well, and you probably know all those folks in the States, who really loved our podcast with Dr. Beach, and mentioned that really we need to get to an outcome based regulation, like an outcome based situation, so that you have something to aim for, like an optimal state. And that's exactly what we've been doing, right, in our development of water health index, and giving people that prescriptive data model that says, okay, here's the optimal state, here's where you are right now, and this is how you're going to get there. And you have a very objective way to help you to take small incremental steps to work at a very different level of operation. And as you mentioned, our friends at the town of Oakville, who have been working towards this, not just in water quality management, but also on their ice pads and other ways. Like they're continuously measuring and looking for ways in which they can start to get to a more optimal process in everything that they're doing. I think for public health, though, it's a big challenge as well, right? Because they come across lots of different systems, lots of different applications, and they also are responsible not just for pools, but for a whole host of different systems. And so, how could we maybe also help the health inspectors to, give them the necessary tools to feel very comfortable, using those digital systems and those automated systems? Like there's things that we can do, obviously, to facilitate that as well.
If you're asking me, well, first thing I know about public health is they're all well educated, and I get the opportunity to work with quite a few of them next week.
Right.
I'm actually going to be down your way, talking to a group of health inspectors, and like every other profession, constantly evolving is a really good thing. And I think if you show them, I always say about health inspectors, people get really upset. I feel bad for them in many cases, because you can see the frustration of operators. And I say, if they walk into your facility and you're organized and you have good data, and you understand your pool, they're going to be really comfortable signing off for you. If they walk in and you're competitive and you're dismissing everything and you don't really have a good handle on their water chemistry, so you get frustrated at them,
right,
they have to sign off. If somebody drowns 2 days after they leave, whether it has nothing to do with that sign off of
yes,
that evaluation, they are called to court. They are signing their name on the line that pool was in good shape on that day, and they will be questioned. So understand that the better prepared you are, the more of an expert you are,
right,
the more comfortable
exactly.
they are leaving. I'd rather talk to a PhD, right, than a first
Yeah.
year student. So
Yeah, no, I think that's
for
a
your
really
stuff,
good
and
piece of advice.
then
Yeah,
explain it. Right,
right,
explain it. And these
right.
folks are smart. They'll get it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to approach that. And I guess one of the questions that came from someone that we met over the last number of weeks was that if you have an automated monitoring system, does
Mm.
that then relieve you for smaller facilities? And I don't know, there's a Class A and a Class B pool, I guess, so there may be some differences in there. And I think you're very familiar with the regulations. Does that relieve you from having to take 2 hourly hand grab samples if you have an automatic system? Can you take
Yeah, you
less?
can go to a 4 hour test method. Um, and so that just alone, right? If you rather than having somebody hang on, so that's only twice a shift really that somebody has to go in
Sure.
there. But you want good monitoring too. When you do a test, in my estimation, this is my explanation, you're verifying that your automatic system is working correctly. That's what
Absolutely.
you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you have good test equipment and it works consistently, you can have pretty good confidence in it. And, hopefully in 10 years, this is back to the training piece. The better trained our operators are, the better our public health can say, yeah, we can give you some latitude because you have good equipment.
Right.
The health code is built right now to the lowest common denominator, quite honestly, and we need to get by that. So if you're trained and you have the right digital tools and you know how to use them, we can let you free. If you
Exactly.
if you
Yeah.
don't, we can't really. We have to keep a pretty close eye on you.
Right.
It's a stepping stones, and we're talking down the road, right? In 10 years, we'll be using automatic cars, and
Right. And I mean, if you look at some of the most progressive jurisdictions, I guess they do allow automated monitoring in
mm,
lieu of
yeah,
hand grab samples, but only after a very long trial period, only after having been able to demonstrate that those automated samples are reliable and completely consistent with the hand measurement. So that, you're using a photometric colorimetric principle that basically you can be absolutely certain that when it says, 1.5 ppm of chlorine, it's exactly 1 point or 1.51 ppm of chlorine, right? Like you can be absolutely certain of that. And that's kind of, ultimately a process that we all have to go through because, like you say, you have to be sure that what's on the wall and what's, your hand tool is going to be consistent and is going to be calibratable and still meets all of those criteria that we talked about earlier in the show as well. So I completely agree with that.
it's
And
a
it's,
good
yeah, go
a
ahead.
good thing for the people who are swimming there. It's good for the operators. It's good for public health.
Yes.
It's good for our environment.
Right, right.
That's
And
that's
it's a thing of beauty when you see a process optimized. People are like they've got eyes like saucers to say, "Wow, I didn't realize this was possible."
right.
When you give them a very narrow, prescriptive, okay, this is the optimal state for your pool. People are like, "Okay, that's not possible," and it is. And then they go, "Wow, that's so
Well,
great."
and you said it, Els, like it's stepping stones, right? We don't have to
Right.
do it tomorrow. We're going to
No,
do
no,
this and then see what happens. And we're going to do this and build on to that. And then we're going to build
exactly.
on this. And then you'll see the outcome and you'll see the performance happen. And it's like, wow, this is awesome, right?
Yep.
I do martial arts. You don't start doing, 200 moves. You start doing one move and then you do two moves. And then in 5 years,
Right.
you got all the moves or whatever you're building at, right? Whatever you do in life. So
Yeah.
those are all it's stepping stones, and leading a path for people because of knowledge
Right.
that you can share, and this is how we can get there. That's
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good analogy as well. And for every little step that you make, there's a return on investment. There's a tangible waste reduction or time reduction, or there's some saving in some way that you can really point to objectively and say, okay, now that we're doing this, this is actually has this positive impact, right? So taking us back to our pro presentation on going green and pools, and not green pools, mind you, but
yeah. Green
going
pools
green.
is a tough one. Yeah, it's always tough
No,
to say that in the same sentence. But
I know.
like at a location, it's if they have the technology and the manager or supervisor can have it on their phone, and if there is a question, it's immediately available.
Exactly.
It's not
Yeah,
a
and you know
And we
what's
also
happening.
the staff, right? This whole staff thing is not in pools or this or that. It's every
Yeah,
profession is
for
struggling.
sure. Very
So
difficult.
all that comes to focus, and just getting on to that and trusting that,
Yeah,
I think is so.
agreed. I mean, there are always folks that like the status quo. So, what would you say to, those folks that think that practice makes permanent and we've always done it this way and why do we
So
need to change it? Like you must come across this a lot in your training
absolutely.
all of the time.
I have people who kind of flinch in their chairs when I'm speaking because I'll talk about certain items and they're going like, we don't do that way. We don't, that's wrong. I'll use a simple example. And I always ask this in classes. I said, how many people drain their pool every year? People put their hand up and said, so why do you drain it? And there's many people, if there's a reason, tiles work or whatever, that's whatever those are things, those are maintenance items that you have to take care of.
Right.
But a vast majority of people drain their pool every year because they've always drained their pool every year. And I'm just using this as an example because it's on the top of my head. I just had a chat about it. So I go, so why do you drain your pool? Well, because we drain it every year. Yeah, we have to. Who told you had to? Well, we have to. I said, you're actually not have to. And to drain a 25-meter pool is probably 20 grand. So there's cost savings and energy savings and all those things that you do. So just have a purpose for whatever you do, whether it's that or whatever you do at work. Think about it, have a purpose for it, and then make it work. And that's just a simple thing that people don't recognize. It's a habit. What did you just say to me? The status quo. And I always say, because Bill told me. Well, who's Bill? Bill's the guy who worked here before me, and he knew everything about pools. And did he?
Sure. Yeah. No, and exactly right.
And we want to embrace change. And I don't call people on a phone anymore. I don't have a landline at home anymore. Why? Because I have a cell phone and it does great things. So I've evolved. So a pool system can be like that, where you take the tools and use new technology and new tools and new thinking. And it doesn't always have to be, it can be the whole entire pool system.
Yeah.
To know it better.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. I as we kind of close kind of our conversation, we've got a little bit more time left. I maybe wanted to broaden it a little bit to, okay, so you obviously, what are the most common things as you're doing your CPO training? Like, what are some of the most common questions? What are the most, I don't know, the things that kind of pop up the most as you're taking them through the course? They got to take their exam, like they have an opportunity for Q&A, I presume. So what are some of the most common things that you get asked about?
Well, like the most basic things I would say, Els, are people don't understand using different types of disinfection.
Yes.
And how it affects your pool chemistry. Using, well, they use the extremes, gas chlorination versus sodium hypochlorite, like huge change in how, and then it gets back to the pH, which is, what is it else? It's the most important part of your disinfectant. Well, what type of disinfectant do you use? And then what kind of pH control you use? And then bringing that together. Those are what you would consider basic ideas, but getting people to understand that their disinfectant is huge, that their source water, and I'm a huge person on this, the source water and how important it is to the operation of your pool every day. Those are really misunderstood items.
I agree.
I think I'm really, trying to bring forward to people and to help them understand their pool more closely or more correctly. I was really elated. Last week I was at a customer's place and I went down into the filter room and they have a huge whiteboard erected now. And in the corner they had May 31st, source water, alkalinity, pH. And that's something I talked about in a pH class, in a CPO class, and somebody did it. And now he said, oh no, we do this every month. And it's a discussion item with the operators. And he said, and we're, so that's a growth, right?
That's great. That's really great.
Stuff like that is most common, rather than on a macro level. Most of it's basic understanding of it. What we've said 20 times already, the pH, just the basic water chemistry and the relationship between alkalinity and pH and disinfection. And they all piece together. I call it bacon and apple pie. All the ingredients have to be correct.
Yes.
Really good pie.
Yeah, for sure. And we've worked with clients who have had to contend with very challenging source water,
Oh,
and found that, when the original kind of work was done, that was really maybe missed or not understood properly, right? And so the implications are significant as well. So I think it behooves us to all work together with, the engineering companies and the pool builders and everybody kind of coming together around this to say, okay, let's get it right from the get-go, and let's make sure that we look at things from a systems thinking approach, as we talked about earlier, so that we're not missing some of that, because it will, like you mentioned, have a significant impact. Like we've had some clients measure conductivity and just get a conductivity probe, and that can be a very helpful indicator for what's coming into your pool, and ultimately, how your water refresh is working, or whether it has a huge impact if your incoming water has high conductivity, because potentially it is very hard or has high alkalinity, or whatever it might be, as well as all your water chemistry, of course. And I think what we're going to do, and Scott, you and I, we'll announce it when we're ready, but we're certainly going to be doing some training on alkalinity and pH and the relationship between the two and how to manage it properly, because there's a lot of misunderstanding on that topic. At least that's the impression that we both get, right, when we're talking to
right.
people.
So when I'm teaching a course, like I can't go deep into anything.
No,
It's overarching most of it.
right,
But really, those are things that people. I've had folks who run pool companies in my courses, and they soak it up like a sponge and go, I've been talking to people for years and never really even had this brief discussion. I would have known what to say. So they just, and then they call me later and go, I need to know more about this, right? Like
right,
a chat one-on-one type thing, things that they
yeah, and
want
you
to
can
know.
help
And
them.
hopefully
Yeah,
they take it and learn from it and move forward with it. But
yeah,
it's growing, right? That's the science. I was down in Reno, Nevada, in February, and I did a talk down there, and there was 1,500 people at this particular conference. What are we all doing? We're talking about the science of pools. It's not just throw a little chlorine in the back and away you go. It's a science, and it's evolving, and hopefully we're helping people understand that more, and that excites them to learn more as well. Because I'm still scratching the surface of my own brain, and uh, we've got a long way to go.
indeed. And that's the wonderful part about all of this, is that we're learning continuously. We're continuously getting better. And there's some very positive outcomes, that everybody can win in this conversation, which I think is a really great thing. Maybe I'll let you finish with any remaining thoughts for kind of this summary session, which I think has been really helpful. But any final thoughts you want to convey to our audience before we close out for this podcast and get ready kind of for the next one?
Well, it's amazing how quickly a year's going, and so that's pretty cool stuff. What for people who run pools and operate, I always really big advocate of both the senior manager right to the operator to the lifeguard getting trained, so that the manager and the senior manager knows what the operator is talking about. So many times when I'm having a discussion, not in a class, but if I'm at a meeting or something, that the folks who are really the decision makers don't really have the base understanding to help
Yes,
promote that, because the people who have the purse strings need to understand what the operator is really looking for. Otherwise, they go and defer to other ideas, sometimes public health regs or something like that. Say, well, this is
right.
all we have to do. Well, yeah, but you want to move past that marker. And I think that's, I'm back to training, right? But I think it's so vital. And I think just for an overarching understanding for everyone in the room, I, I really like some places when I see the senior manager right to the new person in the room, and everybody's having the same discussion. And wow, have we ever had some great talks where that person's going, well, you can't do that. Why not? Well, because we don't have the funds for it. Well, we can make that happen. Oh, right. It's a learning moment for everybody.
I
And
agree. I think that's
it's,
such a, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's simple stuff. It's just
Well,
understanding.
it is, but in many ways there is a disconnect, of course, like we've talked about before, between the plumbing engineer and the water engineer.
Mm,
There's a disconnect between the senior manager or the director in a municipality and the people on the ground who are running operations. But the exciting part is that there is an opportunity to get kind of everybody connected, and where it's happened well, and we can talk to that, both of us speak to that, is that those people are all getting involved in this conversation.
Absolutely.
Because and we've had the privilege of working with some great municipalities, and where you bring your sustainability people in, you bring your your both your operational maintenance and kind of the aquatics people all together to say, okay, we have a vision for doing this better. And I think that really helps to get that conversation going, because ultimately, there has to be an economic reason for doing this. And there is. That's the exciting part, right? There is an economic reason for doing this. And then all of the other benefits that you get on top of that, such as reducing your risk, reducing your waste, having just a generally better experience for all your guests and your staff that have to work there, and being kind of a best practice facility, so that people are going, wow, I love it here, want to come swim here, right?
And people might not even know why they love it there, but they
I
love
know.
it. And it's I use the analogy because we're all Canadian, we know this. People who play hockey, they know good ice. Why? This is really good ice. And
yeah.
why is that?
Yeah.
It just skates better, right? You know that. If you're a swimmer, you know a good pool.
You do.
You know when it feels right. For competitive swimmers, you know a fast pool. Those are things we learn when we become proficient at something. But for the common guest, if they walk in and they leave and their lungs, their eyes, everything feels good, 3 hours later, they're not all groggy. They don't know why they had a better experience, but they did.
They did, yeah. And I mean, there's interesting signs there that speaks to, better air quality is going to lead to a much improved athletic performance, for example. So, we should be talking to all of those competitive teams that want to actually accomplish that and train in those kinds of pools. And generally, until you don't know what you've got until, like you say, you can't even put your finger on it, but you go and swim there, you go work out, you swim hard, and your eyes aren't burning. You don't feel unwell. You don't feel like you've you need a half an hour shower to kind of detox, right?
Michael Phelps had pools he wouldn't swim in down in the U.S. colleges, and there was a
Is that
reason.
right?
Yeah, that was a true thing. And
I believe it.
wait, that's a big weight.
That's a big weight. And we work with an aquatic center in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Our colleagues in Europe do. And it's the biggest training center for the Olympic swimming team in Holland. And, they use our digital tools and our automation tools for, managing chemistry in there. And that's a big reason, right? There's a lot. And that's where the automated monitoring happens as well. But generally speaking, it's because they're looking for the best. They're looking for that optimal experience so that they're not going to be somehow negatively impacted by things that, like Michael, told us in the last podcast, can actually be avoided and don't have to be the way that they are.
Michael Beach.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's it. That was one of his central thoughts, to say, okay, it doesn't need to be this way.
No. And there's a guy with passion, right? Like us, just you can see it oozing.
Yes.
So, yes.
For sure.
Like individuals.
Indeed. So I think we've come to the end of this podcast. I wanted to thank you, Scott. I've learned some more things from you today. Your valuable insights, as always. I think it is a great learning summary for our listeners and a good place to start from. Next month, we'd like to explore the topic of disinfection byproducts, what they are, how they are formed, and what can be done to reduce them. And it's not something that's necessarily well understood. There's your total chlorine and your combines, but there's a little bit more to the topic. So we look forward to getting into that conversation. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. You can re-listen to this episode by subscribing to our YouTube channel, connecting with us on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and smash that notification bell because that helps us in our ratings and so on and so forth. If you have questions about this episode or future topics, please email Scott or myself, or email us at mywatertalks@sanicotech.com. From Scott and me, thank you all and enjoy the rest of this day.